Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chase and this is All Things Room. Today we are looking at the FEELNEVER watch, specifically the 500-meter diver. Now, because this is another watch review, I am going to have to give a shout out to my own watch strap company, chasestraps.com. In fact, this Seiko, this beautiful Seiko Comex is actually on one of my vintage brown suede leather straps. In fact, I've been wearing this thing for, I don't know, probably 3 months on this strap, and there's you know, hardly any wear compared to other straps that are out there on the market. Anyway, chasestraps.com, link down below. Now, there are going to be some discounts coming up in the future because I just got new product in, and in an attempt to sort of, you know, shift some, you know, some perspective on other products on the website, I'm going to be doing a discount probably in a couple weeks, so look forward to that. I am going to mention it in almost every single video because I'm trying to build my own brand. All that being said, let's talk about this 500-meter diver. Now, this is a watch from Aliexpress. Some people love Aliexpress, some people hate Aliexpress. I look at Aliexpress as another sort of Amazon where I can find a lot of good product for a lot of discounts. Now, the name FEELNEVER is not really one that, you know, sort of conjures up the deep sea. However, it is a pretty damn good watch. Now, I've had this watch for about, I want to say 3 weeks, and I've been wearing it consistently because I wanted to give you guys a good review. Now, all that being said, let's just flip the camera around and dive right into the review. Okay, and today we are talking about this. This is the FEELNEVER. Specifically, this is the 500-meter diver. And you can tell this thing is a 500-meter diver because this thing is as thick as Kim Kardashian's backside. So all that being said, let's actually talk about the watch. Okay, so first let's talk about the packaging that this watch came in, which is this thing right here. Now, a lot of watches from AliExpress, and this was from AliExpress, come in these type of watch cases. Now, I'm just fine with that because these are basically like semi-waterproof cases, and they actually act as a pretty great storage, you know, for your watch. Hard-sided storage is always better than just a basic watch box you'll never use. Really big fan of it. Now, it came with a push pin remover for the links. I again size it for my wrist, so the extra links have just been tossed in here. My wrist is 7 1/4 inches, and we'll get over that when we actually look at the size of the watch. Speaking of the size of the watch, let's just go over the dimensions real quick because that's going to be a real deciding factor when actually purchasing this watch. This in no way is a thin watch. In fact, you heard me just make a reference to Kim Kardashian's backside because this thing is one thick mommy. And I say that because, you know, 500 meters is nothing to, you know, joke around about when it comes to actual water resistance. Now, this thing is 46 millimeters in diameter, so this is a rather large watch. The thickness of this watch is 20 millimeters. Now, just as a reference, when we are talking about how thick this watch is, this is a gray suede strap from my watch strap company, Chase Straps. And you can see that this thing is, you know, this is 20 millimeters. This is the basic lug width of a standard Submariner. And you can see right here that it is, you know, 20 millimeters in diameter. So the thickness of this is no joke. In fact, you know, this thing is on your wrist. They say this thing weighs 110 grams. I would beg to differ because I've worn a lot of watches that are 100 grams, 120 grams, 130 grams. I don't have a scale necessarily at my house because I'm not a drug dealer. However, I can tell you that this weighs a little more than 110 grams. In fact, I think my bicep on my left arm has gotten slightly larger simply wearing this watch. Now, all that being said, yes, this is a chunky watch. However, when it comes to chunky watches and watches like this, they can take quite a beating. In fact, I can tell you that this watch on AliExpress, if you look at the link down below, non-affiliate, there is no discount code for me. But this watch is like $170 and you get a lot for your $170. Now let's just take a stroll around this watch and we'll talk about all the features. Now, first on top of that dial, and we'll talk about the dial in just a minute, is a sapphire crystal with air coating. Now this thing has great air coating. They don't specify whether it's on the top or on the underside. I assume it's on the underside because people who use air coating, to include Omega, on top of the sapphire is just it's just a negative thing. So I hope that they didn't do that, but they don't specify on what they did with the air coating. But it does have a dome piece of sapphire glass on the top, sapphire crystal on the top, which is nice. It does have a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and this bezel is extremely, it locks into place. I'm not really necessarily concerned that I'm going to bump it and it's going to go anywhere. It gives me some really nice, hard, solid clicks. Everything lines up absolutely perfect on this watch. Specifically, didn't go over it. I have the coffee brown here. So the bezel matches the dial, which is going to be like a brown. Brown is not necessarily my favorite color, but on this watch, it actually works quite nicely. Now let's talk about the case. 316L stainless steel, super chunky, super thick, like I said. And in fact, you can see that this screw down case back is also rounded and super thick. Basically, when it comes to really deep dive watches, there has to be a couple things when you're talking about water resistance. And a lot of times what they do is they design these watches in sort of like a submersible design, which means it's more curved than it is square, because the pressure of the water kind of evens out along the entire case and, not necessarily towards corners, which are weak points under water pressure. All that being said, really love what they did with the case. Really nice brushing. I like the step down to these lugs. It's not just a basic dive case like you see on everything else. It is a little different. And again, it is kind of chunky. It does have a manual release right here for the helium valve. It does have a chronograph feature with this Seiko VK63 meca quartz movement. We'll get into that in just a second. Screw down pushers right here. Screw down crown, beautifully signed. It does have rather large crown guards right there. However, speaking of crown guards, the reason why the crown guards are there is so you don't hit the crown and break the crown. However, if you break a pusher, right, it could still have some water intrusion there. So I think it's kind of funny that you have these screw down pushers, but then you also have crown guards. It's just one of those things I find kind of funny. Now, again, it does have a signed crown, and honestly, everything on this watch looks quite nice. Like I said, the lug width right here is 22 millimeters. It does taper down slightly, and it does have what you'd expect in 2022. It does have solid end links. It does have solid links. Everything is nice and brushed, but they're kind of lacking on the clasp right here. It does have a press clasp with milled hardware. So it's sort of an in-between, but a little bit depressing because they could have just spent an extra $10, got a proper milled clasp, and it just would have made the world of difference. Is it a deal breaker? Not really. Does have push pins all the way around, does have micro adjustments right there on the clasp. Now let's talk about the movement. It is a Seiko meca quartz VK63. Meca quartz, basically what that means, if you are unfamiliar with what a meca quartz is, it is a quartz movement or a battery operated watch that if you look down at and I'll actually just move the hands out of the way so you can see that subdial at the 6 o'clock a little bit better. Right here, the subdial at the 6 o'clock is a ticking second hand, so it ticks. So basically, a quartz movement is a ticking second hand. And the meca quartz kind of gives you the best of both worlds. So it does have a static timer hand right here. Press the pusher at the 2 o'clock and you can see that it does tick at about 5 ticks a second. So it sort of gives you the feel of an automatic movement or a mechanical movement, except instead it has the reliability of a quartz, also the ease of a quartz. I say the ease of a quartz because, you know, you don't have to change the time if you haven't worn it in a couple days. That's one of the downfalls of automatic watches or mechanical watches or manual wind watches, is if you don't wear them consistently, or you don't wind them consistently, or you don't have them on a watch winder, then basically you have to reset them every single time. It does have a date down here at the 6 o'clock just beneath that lower subdial for the seconds. It does have a 24-hour indicator, and it does have a 60-minute timer over here off to the side by the 9 o'clock. Now, I really like the dial on this watch, and it does sort of have a step down dial. I say that because if you look around the chapter ring right there, it is a tachymeter, but it's stepped up. Step down is the dial. It does have a beautiful texture. It's really hard for me to sort of get it on camera. I will do a close-up shot and show you guys, but it does have a beautiful textured dial. Really like it. Then it steps down even further to the sub dial. So it is a stepped dial. Now the indices are applied, and it does have beautiful lume on this watch. Now they say that it's tritium powered. However, I don't necessarily believe that. Also, on the Aliexpress website, it says that this is a Seiko Meca Quartz VK63 in one spot, and then they say it's a Seiko VK67 in another spot. So, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. Now let's toss this on my 7 1/4 inch wrist so you can see what chunkiness actually looks like. Okay, and here's the watch on my 7 1/4 inch wrist. You can see that it sits extremely high on the wrist because it is 20 millimeters. So is this gonna slip underneath your cuff? No, it's not. If you wear this diving, it's gonna do quite well. It's gonna seal out all the water, and it's gonna do its job. Is this something that you're gonna wear in a suit? No, not really. Now everything fits quite nicely. And again, the footprint of this watch, or the lug to lug, I don't have working calipers right now, so I can't really tell you, but the lug to lug is just enough to where it sort of cuts off at my wrist bone right here, and it sort of drops down. Honestly, this is about the biggest style watch I would ever wear when it comes to the diameter of the watch. I wouldn't wear anything bigger than this at all, ever, just because my wrists aren't big enough, and neither am I. I'm a 190-pound, 5'11" guy, and honestly, I just can't pull off a larger watch. If you're 6'2", maybe this would work great, but for me, it's the chunkiness that really, you know, sort of, you know, is a little off-putting to me. Now, it is a 500-meter diver, so it is going to be chunky no matter what. You're buying this because you like the technical specs of this watch, not necessarily the fact that it slips under the cuff extremely well because it's very thin. If you want a very thin watch, well, get a dress watch. It'll slip right underneath the cuff. This is a durable watch. If I wore this at work as a police officer, or I went diving in this watch, I wouldn't have an issue with it at all, but it is a chunky watch. I think one of the things that really does kind of level the playing field with this watch and other watches is the fact that it's under $200, and you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. I love the case of this watch. I love the step down to the lugs. The brushing is beautiful. The 120 click unidirectional bezel is awesome. The dial is done perfectly, and it does have that Meca Quartz movement. I've seen watches more than twice this that offers far less. So honestly, you are getting a lot of bang for your buck. Now, what do you guys think about this watch? Do you love it? Do you hate it? What do you think? It is so thick. It is so thick. It is ridiculous. However, understand that even the Sea Dweller is extremely thick. And I have done a review on a Rolex Sea Dweller, and that thing was a chunky watch, to say the least. So if you want a deep sea diver, you're gonna end up having to deal with the fact that it is a heavy, chunky diver, but you get a lot for under $200. Now, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about this watch. If you like it, if you hate it. Now, I'm not a big fan of the coffee brown, but it does really work. They do offer other colors. So, you know, look at the website and you guys can make your own opinion. Now, if you like videos like this, hit that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment of the content you guys would like to see on this channel. I have a lot of videos coming up in the future. In fact, I do have a Seiko, not the Seiko Comex diver, FEELNEVER. I have another Seiko coming in. In fact, it is a custom Seiko that looks like it's about 60 years old. I'm extremely excited for that vintage Seiko, right? That forced vintage Seiko look. That watch is coming in hopefully next week. Super excited for that. I have a lot of other videos coming up in the future. In fact, I have a laser video. I've done a cheap Amazon laser or an Amazon laser in the past, and a fellow who owns a laser company from Canada reached out to me and asked me to review his laser. That is also coming up in the next video. I'm super excited about that because this is all things random, and I love just that random stuff that I can bring to you guys. Sort of like in the last video, I did the underwater scooters. I love dive stuff, which is exactly why I like dive watches. Now, I actually took this with me to Hawaii. I wore it a little bit in the water, but again, it's just too chunky for me. I am not a chunky guy, but if you are a larger guy, this could be for you. Anyway, again, if you like videos like this, hit that subscribe button, comment down below of the content you guys would like to see, and I will see you in the next one.